Hi everyone, and thank you for tuning in to the Smarter Building podcast powered by Symetri. My name is Nicole Georgiou, and I'm the Architecture, Engineering and Construction Marketing Manager here at Symetri in the UK, and I'll be your host for today. We decided to start this podcast to help everyone involved in the design, construction and ongoing operation process of a building keep up with the evolving digital landscape in construction as client demands for smarter and more sustainable building grows. On today's show, I'm joined by Benjamin Hall, Product Manager at Green Canopy NODE. Thank you for joining us all the way in the US, Benjamin. I know it's very early for you over there, and I'm glad we could finally get you on the show.
Great, thank you.
And so before we delve in into sustainability in the construction industry, could we just hear a bit about yourself, your interests and your hobbies?
Yeah, certainly. So first, I just want to say thank you. I'm excited to be here, to be on the show to talk about the work we're doing at Green Canopy NODE and sustainability in general. For me, I'm from the Midwest. My dad was a home builder. I grew up around this stuff, and I've lived on the West Coast now since 2017. Recently married. My wife and I, we really enjoy traveling and just the outdoors. Live probably one of the most beautiful parts of the country here, up in Seattle, and we have the mountains, the water, and then outside of that, just love learning, designing, building, anything fabrication, which is kind of puts me in this field, and it's a perfect fit for me.
Congratulations. I've also just recently got married as well.
Congratulations.
Hope everything went well for you. So have you managed to get much traveling done this year?
Definitely, yeah. The honeymoon put us in Europe for 3.5 weeks, and that was a wonderful experience. Just seeing, we went, I think, 3-4 different countries and just saw a bunch of beautiful spots and beaches and mountains, and it's great.
Lovely. Great, thank you. So then a bit more about your professional background. So what brought you to Green Canopy NODE, and what makes you passionate about what you are doing now there, and what do Green Canopy do, if you could just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, so my journey into the building industry really started with school. I went to a small liberal arts school, Georgiou University. It's in the Midwest again, and it was kind of a place where you could chart your own path. That you could, we had professors that would support you in whatever your interests were. And I was fortunate enough to study abroad in Denmark, and that's where I saw this convergence of sustainability mixed with large housing projects that were these repeatable units, and also it was just really fun. And what I really enjoyed about both that time in Denmark and just time in architecture school in general was, the projects we worked on, they had a social focus. There was this human-centric approach to design that I found really rewarding, and got into the real world, and that was not the case. I think you go into the real world and everything's driven by money, it's driven by ego, and so I had to find an outlet for myself to reconnect myself to design and that human-centric approach to design. And so some friends and we started this nonprofit. We were building schools in West Africa. It was a design, fund, and build. And it was a great experience. And what I realized through that, so we were taking donations from people in the Midwest that they didn't have a lot of money, but they're happy to donate money to us. So $20 here, $100 there. And they wanted to give this money that they had, spare money, to help the lives of those who had very little in West Africa. So this pressure just mounted, and said, we can't get this wrong. And if we're gonna waste any dollars, we just need to pass it off to a nonprofit who can actually turn this money into something good. So instead of doing that, we just started counting everything. So we figured out the cost of each building material we were using, the exact quantities, how many cement blocks we needed. And for the first time as a designer, this is really rewarding, because I had almost real-time data on each design decision I was making. I knew the cost of adding a window. I knew the cost of adding a wall by a few feet here and there, what that equated to. And it was a really good experience. I loved having this information at hand. So I did that for a bit, and then following that experience, I moved to the Bay Area. And this is my first time working with large housing projects. We're designing projects for some of the largest developers in the US. And there, I realized what I'd call this Howard Rourke fallacy, and that is that we as architects, we like to think that we're creating unique and these innovative designs every time we put pen to paper, but really we're just repeating and reconfiguring what's been done. We live in this world of constraints, creating details based on manufacturer warranties and homes based on market expectations, and it's all quantifiable, but we don't actually take the time up front to understand, to put that into numbers and understand the impact of our design decisions. And so we're just guessing every time we do it. So we're guessing on cost, we're guessing on sustainability every time we're making these design decisions. And so this was just playing in my mind because I had this experience from my work in the nonprofit. And after some time, I was fortunate enough to get in contact with the CEO of what was at the time Node, now Green Canopy NODE. And we just chatted. We chatted about housing. We chatted about automated design, parametric design, and what we could do for sustainability and housing, and to make housing affordable. And everything clicked. It just clicked. And then a few weeks later, I was packing up my bags and moving to Seattle. And so we started on this journey to bridge this gap, the sustainability and affordable gap in housing.
Wow, that's amazing. So how long have you been at Green Canopy NODE now?
So it's been 3 years with Node, and then we merged about a year ago. So with what was Green Canopy, so now Green Canopy NODE. And what that looked like. So Green Canopy, they're a housing developer, a green sustainable housing developer in Seattle, and they do development. They have architecture services, and they have construction services. And we were this small startup. We had, I think, 7 people at the time, and we were just constantly in R&D. And so with this merger, now we are this product team that is supporting this developer, architect, and construction team.
Okay, that makes sense. Great. So obviously sustainability is in sharp focus right now, and rightly so. There are lots of different definitions and aspects of what sustainability means in the industry. Could you briefly describe what it means in relation to our industry and why it is important?
Certainly. Yeah, so I think first to start off with the fact that we're looking at, and that is that we know the building industry, it accounts for 40% of global carbon emissions, and then 73% of that is from building operations or operational carbon. And then the other 27% is coming from building materials, and that is the embodied carbon. So really, it all comes down to carbon, with operational and embodied being the focus of our efforts. And why it's important is because we've all seen the ticking clock showing how long we have to get to zero emissions before raising Earth's temperature 1.5 degrees Celsius, causing irreversible, at least in our lifetime, climate change. And at the current rate of the carbon emissions, we have 7 years to get there. So it's incredibly important right now.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think, or where do you think the construction industry is currently in terms of the adoption of more sustainable practices and materials? Do you think it differs from country to country, or how do you see that at the moment?
Yeah, it definitely differs country to country, region to region as well, individual to individual. But as a whole, I think we're making, as an industry, we're making strides towards mitigating the building industry's carbon footprint. As I mentioned, we have operational and embodied carbon to address, with operational carbon being that lion's share of the carbon for the building industry, of what we're responsible for. So it makes sense that has been the focus for the longest time. And voluntary adoption of sustainable practices through programs such as LEED, Built Green, which is a local Washington State program, Passive House, and countless others, they're on the rise. So that's great to see. And then there's non-voluntary requirements that are increasing sustainable practices. And that's through new energy code adoption with, in the US, we have Washington State and California leading the way. But to reiterate, as an industry, we're getting really good at addressing the operational carbon and being able to predict a building's energy consumption. And there's still lots of work to do to get to net zero, but at least there's a very clear path forward in how we do that. However, I think what's not being addressed as much, and that's the embodied carbon side of it. So again, you look at the numbers, you see embodied carbon, it only makes up 27% of what we're responsible for. So it's easy to focus on the operational side, but what the difference is there is that, we really just one shot to address embodied carbon, and that's really on the front end. So it becomes really important. And then also, I believe the embodied carbon is becoming a greater focus. We have the development of EPDs, the environmental product declarations, which makes it more feasible. But again, there's a lot of work to get that into practice and make it, to address those concerns and to address that subset of carbon footprint, which is that embodied.
And do you think we are getting nearer to that point to address those issues with embodied carbon, or what more do we need to do to help address that, do you think?
You're probably going to hear me say this a lot, but I think it comes down to education a lot. But we're getting closer, and there's really good groups that are pushing for it. But there's just so much work to do. We just don't know the impact of the materials we're choosing up front, and we just don't have the correct data to understand the difference in materials and to track from resource extraction through construction and do the full life cycle of a building.
Are there subsections of the industry where we see better adoption of sustainable practices, would you say?
Yeah, so in the US, we see it in more liberal states, which I think highlights a political issue. And then we also see it where more money exists, which it highlights an economic and a social equity issue.
And how is this changing, and how fast?
So what I'm seeing as having the greatest impact is the policy and regulatory side. And so more and more restrictive energy codes, building codes are forcing developers and builders to build more sustainably. But as far as how fast it's happening, to put it simply, it's not happening fast enough. I think we need broader strategies and solutions that are aimed at reducing the building industry's carbon footprint, and again, greater education surrounding all these strategies.
Excellent. And back to Green Canopy NODE, how do your solutions help drive sustainable construction?
Yeah, so we're building the future of housing. We are developing a market-ready, fully integrated housing platform that leverages the advantages of industrialized construction, which is productization, it's advanced and automated manufacturing, off-site assembly, strategic partnerships, and all of this is in pursuit of this affordable carbon neutral housing solution. The systems we're developing, and we're addressing operational carbon by being net zero ready, and in some instances with battery packs and solar panels being fully net zero. We'll have an energy efficient building envelope paired with energy efficient systems and appliances. And then we're building with low embodied carbon materials such as mass timber. We're eliminating waste by eliminating unknowns, and everything we do it's modeled and it's placed, and we have a full bill of materials before we build. And then to go with that, we're doing a lot of research, and that's surrounding the impact of using reusable mass timber components in housing to turn housing into this carbon sink, where we can sequester carbon for long-term use in the building industry. And then I'd say lastly, we're working with trusted partners to monetize the sequestered carbon in mass timber building components, and to be able to then sell that on carbon markets, all in an effort to just further reduce the cost of building with mass timber.
Excellent. And apart from adopting your software, what are the big steps or areas of focus that construction companies should be looking at to drive more sustainable construction across their organizations?
I think currently the way the building industry, at least here in the US, the way it's set up, there's very little that construction companies specifically can do. They're at the tail end of development cycle. So what they can push for is greater coordination up front, again, eliminate waste and push for more sustainable materials. They can control or have greater control over the supply chain and management of the supply chain. I think a push for sustainability, it really has to happen at a project's inception, which begins with the developers and the architects. And I think as a designer, it's always been my desire to have concrete data up front to understand the impact of each design decision with respect to cost and sustainability.
Great, yeah, that's a really good point. And from your experience and any projects you've been involved with, would you say there are any particular notable examples that you would consider as exemplary or leading the way in this space?
Definitely. I think first, I'd like to highlight a few examples in the industry with companies that I've been following and really admire and respect what they're doing. On your side of the pond, I think Gropius is a great company at Germany, and they have a presence in Austria. But they have control from design through manufacturing through construction, all with this emphasis on affordability, sustainability, and they do a really good job of addressing the circular economy. So once a building it meets at the end of its life cycle, it can then be disassembled and put to use somewhere else. And then I think Binderholz, they're out of Austria, another great company. They're doing mass timber projects. They have full control of their supply chain. They own the forest. They have control over the reforestation. They're planting seeds that will then become housing in 20, 30, 40 years. And they're in that mid to low rise housing solution. They just introduced their B solution, which is this flat pack, kit of parts, mass timber system that also has these volumetric modules for critical areas such as bathrooms and kitchens. And then, more locally in North America, I think Intelligent City, they're out of Vancouver, not too far north where I am at, but I see them as leaders in North America and what they're doing, and they're in that mid-rise market for housing. That's this fully parametric system, and that's paired with this automated manufacturing, and everything is oriented towards that manufacturing and sustainability of components for housing. As far as our company, we've been working and kind of operating in the semi-stealth mode for a bit, and the work we've been doing, it's not public yet, but there's a lot of excitement on my team from what we're doing, and I know we can't wait to release this system to the public here in this year, actually.
Are there any sort of timescales on that, or is it still under wraps at the moment?
I'd say March is probably our big unveiling is what we're hoping for, shooting for.
Excellent. We'll have to keep an eye out.
Yeah.
And you sort of touched on this earlier, but a lot of the focus and pressure to sort of drive more sustainable construction comes from government emission targets / commitments and legislations. Do you think that these current targets and legislation go far enough and quickly enough?
No, not at all. They're a good start, but the time to act is right now. And again, if we go back to that ticking clock, we don't have time to wait until 2050. And the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, they don't fully know the effects of climate change. Once we get to that 1.5 degrees Celsius rise in Earth's temperature, but we do know the potential threats and the risk, and they're not great. So we need bold action, and we need it now.
Yeah, I mean, I guess some of the stuff that's been going on in America right now is just a prime example of the crisis we're in,
Yeah, it's not good. Forest fires, crazy weather that we've been having recently. It's droughts and then flood. It's not great.
And I guess one of the big things is costs. So often implementing greener processes and practices and adopting greener materials is seen as more costly. Is that correct, or what are your thoughts on that?
It is. It's definitely more costly. As I mentioned earlier, it highlights this social equity issue that exists, that people with money, they can afford the greener technologies, more sustainable technologies, or homes and buildings, but those without, they simply can't. I think, yes, sustainability is kind of this luxury. It's treated as a luxury here. So what we need really is just greater investment from governments in sustainable technologies and manufacturing for sustainable materials. And we also need to change business models. I think it's hard for legacy companies who have been operating successfully. They've thrived in the current system, but we really need new companies that are willing to think differently and more holistically about the issue of sustainability. And we just need innovative business models to follow that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what about as consumers? Should we be doing more? Should we be prepared to pay X% more to have a sustainably built home / school? And do you think we are prepared to do this?
I definitely think we should. We should be prepared. Are we prepared? Not at all. Not to be cynical here, but we're just not. And I think, again, going back to education, it really comes down to that. And it comes down to, how does sustainability impact the individual? How does it impact their future, and how does it impact the future of their children? I think that's a key component, but also as tech leaders, as thought leaders, and just people who are passionate about sustainability, we have this opportunity, and really it's a duty to find ways to lessen the cost impact on our clients and on our home buyers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think some people probably think, oh, if I do this, it's not going to make the smallest bit of impact. But if everybody thinks like that, then it's never going to happen, is it?
Every little bit.
Trying to get that. Exactly. And then what are your thoughts on partnerships which claim to start creating homes with zero carbon footprint and zero energy bills? Do you think we can ever reach that point?
No, I think they're impressive claims. I think that, especially if they're true, companies that are claiming to do this. But I would follow up with, what's the cost? And that's really what it comes down to for most buyers, at least. Yeah. But I'm in the business of trying to solve this problem, of bridging that sustainability, that affordability, and I think it's possible. I'm definitely encouraged by what I see out there, and I think more challenging problems, projects have been designed and engineered by incredibly smart people or determined individuals, of which I think I clearly fall into the latter category. But I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic, and that we'll get to that point of zero carbon footprint and fully renewable energies. And I think recently I heard someone say that it's easy when you have no choice, and that's how I view it. We don't have the choice right now. We just have to do it, and so we are.
Do you think you will ever see it in our lifetime?
Again, I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic. We'll see. I think once we are able to understand the monetize the impact that climate change is already having on communities, and maybe we'll start to invest that money up front into technologies that mitigate it and prevent disasters and build resiliency in our communities instead of just dealing with the symptoms.
Yeah, I guess this leads on to the next point. So obviously there's a lot of challenges going on around the construction environment of today: labour shortages, tech, material cost increases, legislation increasing, and general long-term uncertainty. How do you think this will impact the sustainability piece?
Well, definitely does impact, and I want to come back to the labor shortage, but with regards to uncertainty, I entered the job market following the Great Recession. I caught the tail end of it, but from what I understand, there was a lot of change in that time, especially in the building industry, and the comfort and the certainty that people had at that time before the Great Recession, it's never really returned. So for me and for a lot of my colleagues, I think uncertainty is the only thing that we really know, and it's a challenge. But it forces businesses and individuals to build resiliency and to be adaptable, and I think that's a good thing. With regards to tech, there exists some unique challenges there, but also those challenges present opportunities. So one example that we're going through right now, and it's with the implementation of a company-wide construction management software. It's just a small part of what we're doing, but a very important part. And it's true for any company that when you implement new software, there's going to be growing pains, and especially one that important to the daily work that our individuals are doing. And that's again, that's true for any industry, any company. My wife, she's in healthcare, and this is a problem that her and her colleagues have faced all too often. So we're not any different. However, we have learned from the past mistakes, and we've hired Microdesk, we've hired Symetri to walk us through this process. So with this we're let's say where this gets challenging is dealing with our subcontractors and how they interact with us on these new platforms. So for many of our subs out there, they're just these small crews that they work out of their truck and they survive many years on these emails and phone calls alone. So for them, learning a construction management software and having to remember another password is not desirable. So what that opportunity here is it allows us to invest in them by building up their technological literacy and their management skills. And by doing so, I think it'll offer us the opportunity to build stronger relationships and therefore better projects. And I think after all, a rising tide, it lifts all boats. So that's just one part how we're addressing the technology side. But then when it comes to labor, this is again a huge challenge. It's daunting, but it's a fun one to some degree. It's why the cost to build anything is so high. And so we're trying to address this by identifying what a future workforce in the building industry will look like. Sometimes reimagining what it could look like. And when doing this, I always think of my nephew. He's 13 and he'll watch a football game, American football game. And by the end of the game, he'll have modeled the entire stadium in Minecraft. And it's great. And there's like this whole generation of children and kids that are just like him. And so the question is, how do we change the building industry and how do we attract this generation? They have this ability to create and experience things in virtual 3D that we didn't have the luxury as kids. So how do we build buildings differently? How do we harness their ability to see and build in this new way? Is it VR? Is it AR? Probably both. But then, do we finally get away from these static 2D plan sets? There's so many questions that we need to ask ourselves in this and how we attract this generation and bring in this new labor force, but also change the industry at the same time and bring the industry to where the labor is. So it's a fun question to address, and we don't have all the answers yet, but we're addressing it.
Yeah, and it also goes back to your point that you mentioned, I guess, about education. If people are starting to understand why we need this and understanding what it actually involves, then it's slowly all going to sort of come together. But yeah, but the more and more people we speak to, the key thing is attracting new talent and the younger generation. So it is a very, very good point you've made there. And then I guess, so what enhancements and new solutions are planned at Green Canopy NODE to help your clients and future clients drive more sustainable construction?
Oh man, this is a big year for us. I think we're working on a lot, feeling a bit spread too thin most days, but we have some new hires that are coming on that I'm really excited about. And I think first we're continuing to develop our multi-trade MEP assembly product, and that's for residential projects. And this is a manufactured solution that will greatly expedite the installation of MEP in housing. And then with that, we're going to continue to develop and build our modular CLT building platform. Our first prototype is wrapping up right now, and I'm really excited about how it's turning out given its really quick development timeline. And I alluded to earlier, we'll be publishing the project and releasing more details on that in March. Stay tuned. But to go with that, with the modular CLT building platform, we've partnered with a brilliant team to develop the first mass timber carbon credit methodology. So this will allow us to offset the cost of building with mass timber. So being able to, again, harness, reach those carbon markets, especially there in Europe, but to sell off the carbon that we're able to sequester with our building components. And then we're starting, and this is really exciting too, we're starting this research on circular design of residential buildings that turns houses into that carbon storage structure. And this is the result of a grant that we were able to receive from the Department of Energy. And we're partnering with the Pacific Northwest National Laboratories and Washington State University on that one. So a lot of great research is being done with that we're excited about. And then, we're tying it all together. So we're doing that with this digital thread, working with Microdesk and Symetri to bring all of our teams together and to enable this parametric generative design, create automated workflows and create this manufacturing informed design content. And then lastly, we have a phenomenal development team, design team, construction team. If the R&D team, which is where I sit, if we're before the sprinters, they are the marathon runners, and they're just powering through everything and powering through the distractions, just to continue to deliver this high quality, sustainable housing that we're building right now.
Wow, sounds like you're doing some amazing stuff.
Yeah.
And we'll look forward to hearing it all hopefully in March.
Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Benjamin. We look forward to seeing what you get up to next, and we'll stay tuned and hear from you soon.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you so much, Nicole. It's been a pleasure to chat about this stuff with you.
Yes, I'm glad we finally got to speak.
Yeah.